Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is getting closer and closer to the wonderful holiday of Thanksgiving, where we stuff ourselves to oblivion and do it all over again. So hope everyone's doing good. I'm looking forward to having a little bit of a break from work and whatnot. Pretty nice. Um, I always love the holidays. Movies are a big part of, well, they're a big part of my life anyway, but especially on the holidays. Movies have always been something that we end up doing as a family. I'm going to be going to Opera House Video probably today to get a see what they have for new movies to watch while we recover from our food comas. So, and I try to always be strategic when I go there because the new releases go quick. So I try to get there early when I can and snag up the movies and try to time it right because the day before Thanksgiving, which is tomorrow, Wednesday, in the past when I've gone there, everything is gone, and of course they're closed on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to try something a little bit different today and go there when they first open today, which isn't later, which is weird, but they have weird hours. They don't open till 1, which is strange, but I'm going to try going there today, and that way I can maybe get some first dibs on some new films, and and then get those, and then I don't have to bring them back till Friday because you get them a few days. Plus, they're closed Thursday, so because of Thanksgiving. So we'll see. This is how part of my brain works as far as when I'm going to get movies and things. So it's all good. It's time well spent. So today's show is on it is the continuation of the wonderful and amazing career, one of my all-time favorite directors, and that is Martin Scoresese. And today's show is on a movie. I mentioned in one or two of these videos already. A lot of these movies I actually don't own, which is kind of a shame. I need to eventually buy them on Blu-ray, which I will. I do own a substantial amount of his films. Um, I have The Departed, I have The Wolf of Wall Street, I have Mean Streets, I have Raging Bull, I have there's Last Temptation of Christ. There's I have about 5 or 6 of his films that I own. About four. I have about 4 of his films, or no, I should say 5. I have about 5 films. Shutter Island, I also have, which I did a show on. I have about 5, maybe 6 of his films on Blu-ray, and then I have some DVDs. But there's actually quite a few of his movies I don't own, which is kind of sad and pathetic. But I've seen all of his films many times, and again, he is. Uh, I think he's like an American treasure. He is one of my favorite directors. He is also one of my kind of my heroes. Like I look up to him in a way where it's uh, a little bit different than just being a fan of his films. I just really like his work ethic and and just that he has probably the biggest inspiration that I have from Scorsese is just how just his consistent body of work. I just feel like it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare to have that, and from really any director. Like certain directors I've brought up before, but Brian De Palma, who at one point in his career was like pretty much the best director around, but I kind of feel again these are just my opinions, but I kind of feel like when he got into the 90s or so, his career kind of went off the rails for a while, and he directed a series of movies that were kind of at a point where watching them you're like, wow, like what's going on here? I'm not really sure. It's really kind of disorienting when you think about you know where like case in point a film like what is it called, Mission to Mars with Val Kilmer. which is kind of an awful movie. And then when you think of how he made films like um, Body Double and like Dress to Kill, I mean, just so many incredible movies in the '70s. Carrie. Um, so it's rare. It's rare. I think to find a director, and I also think another example of the same kind of situation would be um, director Ridley Scott's career. Again, early on in his career, he was one of the greatest, if not the best of his generation at that time, especially in the '80s. Alien, Blade Runner. I mean, The Duelist, just one after another. And then in the late 2000s, mid 2000s, or even before that, I am not sure what happened. It just it felt like his whole thing kind of went off the rails to a degree, as far as, and I don't know if it was because of studio pressure, but it just felt like he just lost a lot of the steam and that fire that he had when he first started, and just the consistency. I just personally, I just feel isn't there, and I think it's due to a lot of different factors. How, and I think about that a lot. How when you pick a certain director and you look at their body of work, and where it's really consistent, and then vice versa, where you feel like things kind of got off track, or they, I don't know, they decided to kind of compromise their vision. Maybe there was a lot of studio interference. There's a lot of factors to that, and it's not a thing of where I would ever, of course, not condemn those directors, because those guys are so good at their heyday that that automatic, to me, it just automatically demands respect. They, those both those directors had such an incredible run that their legacy is solidified forever. But you still have to look at it as a fan, and I think about those things a lot. Certain directors where you feel it's pretty consistent. The biggest one, probably the biggest one, my favorite director, Stanley Kubrick. Just everything is kind of impeccable. And also, like, directors like Akira Kurosawa. How you have this level of consistency that is just so strong. So I really, and Scorsese is definitely one of those people. Like, there isn't a bad thing in his, there isn't a bad movie that he's attached to, and I just think everything he's done has been really, really good. And that's one of the biggest things, probably the biggest thing, as far as when I talk about a source, the source, or the main source of inspiration that goes beyond, for me personally, it goes beyond just enjoying their films and watching their films. So that's really, really inspiring. I think Quentin Tarantino is also a pretty incredible director. The only movie I think that he directed, and I've only seen it once or twice. Eventually, I'll see it again. But that the only movie I think that he directed that was kind of a little bit of a mess and just kind of fell off the trails there was Death Proof. Other than that, uh, you know, impeccable, amazing career, amazing career. You can't really any of his films, any of those films, you can't uh, find anything wrong with them. They're just so good. They're just flawless, flawlessly made movies, and I find that really really inspiring. On a level of where, you know, I'm an artist. I consider myself an artist, but when I try to, my main focus that I try to do, amongst there's a lot of other things that I'm always trying to work on, but my main focus has always been, especially the last, 8 years or so. It's still a new process, and it's still a new thing, and it's, I'm still learning a lot as I go, and it's, again, it's still relatively new. But for me, my main focus is writing music, and my main focus is trying to build, you know, a series of calling cards of where music that kind of represents where I was, where I am at the time, where I am now, and it just kind of represents how I am. And mostly it's mostly centered on my band Quantum, and that is my main focus over everything else. So we have, quite a few albums out. So what I try to do with the inspiration I get from someone, say, like Scorsese, is trying to build a body or a legacy of work, even though it's small potatoes, but trying to build a body or a legacy of work that, hopefully can stand the test of time for what it is. Hopefully it's consistent and it's all strong, and there's a lot of variety, but the main thing is just that there is a certain level of consistency to the body of work. Of course, if people like it or they don't like it, that's totally fine or subjective. But that is how I think of those things, and that's how I apply that, and that's really due to that source of inspiration. Especially with where I'm talking about Martin Scorsese. So it runs deep for me. It's not just you have fans of or people who are into movies, and you have people who are like casual fans or people who like. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say, anybody and everybody, no matter who they are or what age they are, for the most part, people generally like movies. People have watching movies or seeing movies or television shows is just a part of our life. Growing up, and then now with people having access to watch movies, on their phone or whatever it is. So it's always been a part of our culture. I think you have two different tiers of that. I think you have like your casual movie fan, and then you have a person who's really drawn to it, who is inspired by film, and they they take it a step further, where it's more of a serious thing for them. And there's like two tiers. There's two tiers of that. There's that person who can put in a movie and have that playing and do laundry, make breakfast, do all these other things. And then there's the person who will put in a movie, and the time that they're actually putting in a movie is focused on actually watching that movie. And that's what that time is dedicated towards. I'm that person. So there's two things. So, it's always meant something deeper to me. Obviously, it's about the experience, but it's always outside of the actual intimate experience of watching a movie. It always is, and especially the last 10 years or so, it's always been a deeper kind of thing or well of inspiration for me. So today's show is on yet again another amazing film by Martin Scorsese, and that is Gangs of New York, which came out in 2002, which is crazy to think of how old this film is. I believe that this film marks the first film collaboration between Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese. The other long-time partnership that Scorsese has had has been with Robert De Niro, of course. So many great films, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, The King of Comedy, The Irishman, the most recent Killers of the Flower Moon. Um, just so many great films. Casino, if I'd said that already. And this was, I believe, the start of the kind of working relationship with involving DiCaprio and Scorsese. Gangs of New York, The Aviator. There was Wolf of Wall Street, There is Gangs of New York. There is Shutter Island, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Departed. So quite a few movies. More so actually than working with De Niro. But it's and the other thing is it's I feel like their working relationship. It's a match made in heaven. I think every film that they have worked on together is just amazing, and I think it's a real interesting chemistry they have, and a real interesting working relationship because it goes beyond just the roles that they have. Essentially, where Scorsese is the director, and then DiCaprio is his main actor. But what they have is kind of the symbiotic relationship where I've like listened to lots of interviews and read a lot about how they work together. They really spend um, so much time working and prepping on things, and in between a lot of these films. The whole process of Killers of the Flower Moon took about, I don't know, 4 years or so before they actually started shooting the film because of all of the research. And Scorsese is like really has said a lot in interviews on how much input he allows DiCaprio to have as far as like certain roles, the way the narrative of a story can be. He's even had listened to him on ideas about basically rewriting scripts. Really, really, they've collaborated on almost every facet together within their projects, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, that's really cool. Like that they have this trust, this loyalty. De Niro also. I mean, De Niro has a really deep history with that, and there's where they work when they're working together on a project like DiCaprio. The three of them all like have this kind of symbiotic relationship, but they really work on every detail of each film, and where they each call the shots, and there's like kind of this equality between all of them as far as what's going to stay, what's going to go, from the technical aspects of the film to where it's the actual narrative, the actual story, and also like if they're adapting their film from a book, which has been the case a lot, they are really, they are both painstakingly involved with all of those aspects, from the actor, the director relationship. Really, really interesting. And they always talk about how they always, when they're on the film, and they're prepping the film, or they're actually shooting the film, especially around DiCaprio and Scorsese, is they end up watching a bunch of films that they're as far as movies that to inspire them, but key points or certain directions they want that particular project to go into, they will make these lists of films and they will watch them essentially and try to model certain things off of that or take direct inspiration. And I just find that super interesting and super fascinating. And you can see that, and it's very obvious from Scorsese's perspective, and if you get the sense anytime you see interviews with him, his like his deep knowledge of cinema is unparalleled. I mean, that's a given. I mean, unbelievable, and but his passion for films, and DiCaprio really shares the same passion and to a degree the same knowledge of the whole kind of science of making films. It's really interesting. And DiCaprio at one point he could have gone in a very different direction. He was regarded as like a heartthrob, but he could have gone in a much more say commercial direction. And been typecasted as playing kind of the pretty boy or whatnot. But he has taken all of these risks, and he very early on in his career, I feel like he gave the gave the public the sense that he's actually uh, a serious actor, like one of the best of his generations. So it's really, you know, something else. I'm trying to think when I first I had always liked DiCaprio, but I remember there was a certain period of where when I saw him in a film, I was like really blown away. It might have been he did a film with Steven Spielberg called Catch Me If You Can quite a few years ago, and I kind of think that that might be the movie where I had always liked DiCaprio as an actor, but I think I remember when I saw that movie, Catch Me If You Can, and it was directed by Steven Spielberg. I was like blown away, and I suddenly started thinking of DiCaprio in a different light, of where he's like a serious actor. I mean, he's got all of this weight and depth to his ability, and I didn't really think that before. I thought he was good, he was solid, good leading man actor, but never thought of him as like I don't know, somewhere in the league of someone like, say, Dennis Hopper or Marlon Brando, like someone who's a serious actor, or even early Al Pacino. But after I saw that movie, I was really paying attention to his career, and I came to the realization that this guy, is an actor to watch, and I think he can do anything. And that's what's happened. I mean, his career is incredible. His track record is incredible. I mean, talk about consistency. But Gangs of New York marked their first collaboration between. It was the first collaboration between DiCaprio and Scorsese, and it's a pretty brutal movie. It's a pretty intense movie. I have not seen this movie in a really long time, but I remember really, really liking it. And it's basically about these two warring gangs in New York in the turn of the century, and this movie is just the very definition of a period piece. The cast is just incredible. Of course, this stars Daniel Day Lewis and Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Henry Thomas, John C. Riley, and Jim Broden. But an incredible movie. Such a I don't know, the very definition of an epic film. But I remember this movie being really, really intense, very violent. But the most, probably the coolest facet of this movie was the level of detail, being that this movie is a period piece. It really is all about world building, and I think this film is an example of. I've always been a big fan of period pieces, especially when, maybe the filmmakers go that extra mile, and I feel like this movie is a really great, grand, if you will, like example of the period piece, because I think when you have uh, such a well refined or defined period piece, that the environment is can be so strong that it acts like its own character, and it just adds to the immersion of that particular film. Sometimes, like, certain films will have, like, if it's a war film or a drama or what have you, they will have it set, in a particular time, and it is a period piece, but they might leave certain things away out of it, particularly around, say, there's a film I do want to see. I've heard it's pretty good. I've heard some mixed things, but I've heard it's pretty good. But like an example, getting back to Ridley Scott, there is a new film based on Napoleon, and Joaquin Phoenix plays Napoleon. I have not seen it. I do want to see it. I'm not sure if I'm going to see it. I'm not exactly jumping out of my chair to see it, just because some his last film, which I cannot remember, with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, the Night film that they did was actually a pretty good movie. But I have a real weird kind of thing for Ridley Scott right now, and I'm not really into a lot of his films. So I don't know. I have reservations about it. I don't know, but I do want to see it. But as an example of like a period piece, this film is takes place in France, obviously, and it is about Napoleon, the iconic figure, one of the most iconic generals and leaders in the military world. But the thing is like I remember seeing the trailer for it, and I thought it looked cool. I saw a little bit of it online, and I went to the movies, and then I saw the trailer. And it was definitely, obviously, a period piece. But the thing that I felt looked a little bit, uh, it felt like it was a disappointment, was that it felt like they didn't go the extra mile where the dialogue and the way it was delivered and the lack of subtitles made it feel like, yeah, visually it looked really, really great, but when it came to um, the dialogue and the characterizations, it felt like it was a little bit flat and it was too kind of modern. It felt like it was placed too much in this modern context of say 2023. It was odd. Whereas like visually it looked amazing. The battle scenes looked incredible, but it just felt like my first impression was I don't think people communicated or talked that way during that period in history. I don't think that's how conversations were formatted. The other thing was I was hoping, which would have brought it even more into the period piece kind of thing, as if it was uh, subtitles, with French speaking actors and dialogue, but with English subtitles. I just thought they really, Scott, could have gone that extra mile and made the film more authentic feeling, from an aesthetic standpoint. So, but again, I haven't seen it, and I will eventually see it. But that's the thing of where I feel like if a film is going to go there and focus on a historical um, event or a series of events or a character, even if it's fiction or nonfiction, it should, and the focus is that it's gonna be a period piece. I always feel like they should go that extra mile and really, make it as authentic as they can. And I feel like Scorsese is a director that takes that kind of period piece concept and goes that extra mile. So, and I think Gangs in New York is an example of that. It's such an amazing film. I got to see it again. I don't own it. It's been a very long time since I've seen it, but I did see it about 3 or 4 times. And again, it was a really. I remember it being really brutal, but just one of the best roles of up until that point Daniel Day Lewis's career. An amazing film. So that Gangs of New York is a movie I eventually, without a doubt, need to buy and add to my collection. So, but definitely check it out. It's a pretty well-known film in his and Scorsese's career, but it's just awesome, and I look forward to seeing it again and eventually buying it. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.